Hello, so this is part 3 of the Numpad widget. The purpose of part 3 was to move away from event tick feeding the Numpad's updated string to the radio, so the parent widget, moving away from that tick and moving towards a function. Also added difficulty because rather than be just doing a radio widget here, I've chosen to do user widget if you look on the top right. So it becomes generic, it becomes like a universal user widget rather than having to have radio widget and then computer widget and then whatever other widget as different separate variables. Also, this stops me needing to cast. So I did a bit of trial and error this morning and last night, figured it out. Let me explain how it used to do it and how it now does it. So, originally, this was tick, like that. So, on tick, check whether this radio's current frequency matches the numpad's input code. Where it doesn't, update it and then update it. Usual thing, like you saw in part 1 and part 2. However, we don't want it to work on tick. We want it to only work whenever it needs to work. But we don't have a direct connection to the radio widget, so we can't do something like like if I do control, can't do something like, oh okay, let's just call an event or update frequency. Let's just call update frequency because it's a generic widget that if you look on the top right of this one right now, parent class user widget, look on the top one of this one, parent class user widget. It is a generic uh, object type rather than specifically radio. So we can't reference radio directly. What we can do is create an interface which they both share. And what an interface is interface. Numpad interface. It's pure and simple. It's a function that multiple blueprints share. And if that, you might be thinking, why on earth would you ever do that? Why would you just not cast it? It's so I don't know the complete details, but essentially it's cheaper than cast, and because it's a shared function, you plug in the interface into all these blueprints, and then they just share it, and then they call each other through this interface. It I probably haven't described that very well. It's a proper learning curve because when I first heard of interfaces, I was like, oh, why would I ever use it? So it just takes some time to investigate. But let me explain how I use the interface blueprint interface, and that should help you understand rather than my poor like string literal word way of trying to explain it. Right. So I created a blueprint interface. So you do right click and then you go to blueprint and then you go to interface. That one. I added in one function. That one function is on numpad pressed. It takes one input, which is a string. No output. It's nothing special. I then go to class settings in the numpad and I add it, like add and then numpad. It's not there because it's already there. I added it to there. I then added it to the same place here. So now you see we've created that bridge between the parent and the child widget through an interface. The child widget already works like this, like before, so you know it does input code entry, great. But when you input that code entry, I've put the the blueprint interface there. Sorry, I need to clear my throat. I've created the blueprint interface there, which you see is here. If we let me rephrase, I've created the blueprint interface function trigger like here within this function. So we see we've got input code entry, which is here, this function. You click in that, we've got send input to parent, which is still on the numpad, not the interface here. We go inside send input to parent. I then get the parent of this widget, which you think, oh, it goes straight to radio widget, wouldn't it? Because you do this and you go, oh, okay, so numpad widget, radio widget, it'll just get the parent. No, it gets the horizontal box, which technically is correct. Um, so I had to do so get parent is horizontal box, get outer object gives me, I don't even think it shows it here, but it was widget tree. And then I get the outer object of the widget tree, and that is the radio widget. And you have to do 2 steps out in my case. Then, so this is get radio widget now. Test the object to see if it's got the interface numpad, which it does because we added it on both the radio widget and the numpad widget's implemented interfaces. If that's true, don't need that one now. If that is true, then you need to just drag that down. I've deleted some of that. I shouldn't have. 1 second. Like that, like that, like that, like delete that one, drag that one there. If it if it's this widget, which is radio widget right now, for this situation is radio widget. If it does have this interface, then for that interface's function, which is on numpad pressed, remember this one, the input, we feed it the input code. The input code, if we go back a step, the input code has just been updated, and it's updated every single key button press. It's updated each time to append each one of these values on. After it's updated it, it then checks to see if it can send it to the parent, well, a parent few abstractions higher up. Then if it can, true, then it sends that input code that's just been updated to the interface. We then go to the radio widget, and you see we've got event on numpad pressed. So it's just the same thing, just rather than you see I've dragged it off as a function, which you can do. You can right click and then convert function to event. It's quite destructive. It says you can convert it back to event to a function, like reverse it. Errors on mine, so be careful with that. But what we've got here is the numpad is the function that does the work. The radio is the function, the event version is the event that collects the work from the function. So it's pinged from the numpad and it's collected in the radio is the best way to describe it. Then we can get rid of that now and that. Then we know it gets pinged. So then we don't actually need that now. Go into there, and if the input that we just pinged from the numpad equals the current frequency, nothing. If it doesn't, then update the current frequency with the input. If I play it now, you'll see what I mean. Oh, I'm in the wrong level because I've restarted it. Sorry, 1 sec. I do testing levels. Save. Play. I know it says radio, but it looks like a pager. In the middle of sorting that out. Equipped. Press E. 45.35, and you know how it's working because it updates the megahertz, because the number we just typed in, that's the numpad widget in the black, but this is the radio widget, its parent. That value we just typed in, the numbers we just typed in, each number we put in pings it to its parent, you see. So
cancel doesn't update. I need to update that to make cancel update, which I can fix now. But you see what I mean? It's working, and this would have worked. This worked with on tick, where it constantly updated every time, but it updated it regardless of me pressing the buttons, so updating the input. Meanwhile, good. Good. I didn't want it to add another decimal point anyway. That's good. It was just a unit test. Meanwhile, it updates it now only when it needs to update it. Let me just drag that there because I'm sick of walking over. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to make cancel ping. So when we do clear, we just wipe it, but we don't call it. But if we never call the input action, then it'll never call the center parent, which will never call to the interface, which will never call to this event version of the interface. You see? Hopefully this is making sense now. Like I said, it's easier to explain sometimes by doing, um, certainly because interfaces like it makes sense to me now, but when I first started it, I was like, oh my god, like I was like, no idea. Do that. That will now fix it because the only issue was it wasn't updating it until we sent a number, which then pings the update through the interface. So now, if I press cancel, it will ping it off the usage of that button now. So that is the interface. Well, that is part three, moving away from event tick to a more performant, um, multi-purpose, universal way of doing it. You might be thinking, Nick, that's a lot of faff just to make it talk to the radio widget. But I can dump this numpad widget now into any other widget, as long as the the outer reference, which you saw in here, as long as that reference is always the actual parent widget rather than just a parent object, so not horizontal box, not size box, not vertical box, for example. As long as this is always pointing to the the true parent boss widget, so in this case radio, in the next case computer, in another case I don't know, like card reader, like keycard stuff. As long as that's pointing to that, and as long as the computer, the card reader, the radio all have the interface plugged in, and they all have the event plugged in, sat pretty waiting for the output from the numpad, it will work. Meaning we now only need one generic variable to ping it through. And to be honest with you, I don't even think we need that now, because getParent is just looking at it's it's looking at the radio widget through the getParent, but we'll keep it for now. It might be redundant now, it might not serve its purpose any longer. Uh, this, but that's that. That's part three. It was a proper head scratcher. I did do a couple of videos trying to figure it out, and then I didn't upload them because I was like, oh, I've reached a blocker. The blocker was I was kind of doing everything right, except from I was doing get parent. I was just doing like get parent and then doing it on numpad pressed, which the problem was the get parent was horizontal box, and then it was widget tree, then it was radio widget. So I was doing everything right. I was just sending it to the wrong layer above it, if you see what I mean. I was sending it to the not wrong parent. Technically, we're not sending it to the parent, we're sending it to the great, great, no, we're sending it to the great grandparent. So that's part three, correct? That's great. It's a big one because I've learned a lot about
interfaces. Like I'm no longer scared of them. Scared of the unknown of what might break if I don't think it through. Part four was, well, is to get the input working on keyboard and also the keyboard numpad, which I've got working for the interaction widget. So I just need to crack that. Just need to crack that for the numpad widget. Then that will universally work for whatever we put the numpad in. We can then use that keyboard and numpad interaction for anything, whether it's in the computer, whether it's on a keycard reader, for example, or radio. And then part five was just tidying it up and just getting rid of some bugs and like that. We don't really need an output for this anymore. It no longer needs to be like a Lego, if you get what I mean. We just need the input in this case, because then all the work's been done inside it before it even gets to the return, which is the output. So yeah, next video will probably be in a few hours, just working on part four, input. Thank you, and I'll see you in a bit.